Hello, nature enthusiasts. Something that I've been asked a few times recently is, what are the effects that this ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is having on birds? It's a really good question. It's been something that I've been kind of curious about myself. So I did a little reading and wanted to share what I'd found. There are definitely many species of birds that are benefiting from the pandemic. We humans have changed our behaviors so much that there are quite a few species that are responding in a positive way to those changes. So an example of this is we humans, on a global scale, are going to beaches a whole lot less. We're just moving around less and going to touristy spots. And beaches are one of those spots that are just not getting as much visitation as they used to. There are species of bird that nest on beaches, and often these are very sensitive to disturbance. And so with people going to beaches a lot, it means that there's not that much space for them to nest. But last year, with fewer visits to beaches, with that less disturbance impacting that area, those birds are expanding their nesting areas. They are spotted nesting in sites that would have been far too disturbed for them to tolerate nesting there. So that's an example of a benefit. More nest sites are available to those birds. Another example of a benefit to birds from this pandemic is in the term of noise. Humans are driving so much less, making so much less traffic noise and other forms of noise, that it has been observed in several species of birds that the birds have to sing less loudly so they can sing quieter and still be heard at the same distance. That means that birds have to spend less energy producing really loud sounds, which means they have more energy to spend doing other things like preening or finding food, running away from predators. So that's a benefit. A reduced noise pollution for birds. And also related to traffic, when you have fewer cars driving around, that means fewer birds get hit by cars. And 2020 saw a distinct reduction in roadkill of birds and many other species of wildlife as well. So that's definitely a benefit that wild animals, including birds, have had as a result of this pandemic. Now, some effects aren't so clearly positive. They're a little more mixed. Two examples of this are when, as a result of less human activity, especially less human visits to parks and stuff like that, outdoor spaces, there's less food waste, which has resulted in smaller flocks of pigeons. Turns out that pigeons have had to spend more time searching wider areas to find food. They can't just go to a concentrated place where lots and lots of humans drop lots and lots of food. They have to spread out and find more food in more areas. And that has resulted in smaller group sizes. Instead of just having one giant conglomeration of hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands and thousands of pigeons, the pigeons have had to break up. Those flocks have split up and scattered around wider areas in smaller groups. And that's resulted in, less impacts of maybe droppings in a specific area, less impacts of that high concentration of a population of pigeons. Is that good? Is it bad? It's not really clear. But it's different. Definitely different. Another example of kind of a unclear advantage is again as a result of reduced tourism. It has been noticed in bird nesting colonies, especially seabird nesting colonies on several different continents, that with lower human disturbance, because of tourists coming to view these amazing concentrations of birds, it's had kind of a mixed effect. Because with that lower impact, more predators seem to be comfortable visiting those colonies and raiding it for eggs. So things like gulls, and even some raptors who live along shorelines like sea eagles, seem to do better because with no humans coming and visiting and disturbing a colony of nesting seabirds, those predators are free to come in and raid more eggs. So it's good for them. Kind of bad for the nesting colony though, because they lose more eggs. So overall, is that effect good or bad? It's a mixed bag. One effect of the pandemic that's probably going to be deleterious for birds and wildlife, so not good, is that this pandemic has caused a reduced work by conservationists, by wildlife managers, by rangeland managers, in the work that they are able to do to control invasive species. It's definitely been noticed that invasive species have spread far and faster during this pandemic than in other years. And so that's going to impact all the native species that those invaders are affecting. This is not going to cause, massive die-offs right away, but long term, it's the kind of thing that is definitely going to have impacts. Most of those impacts on the native species are going to be bad, and it's going to take those humans who would otherwise have been working on those projects, controlling those invasive animals or plants, extra time and extra effort to make up for, if possible. So there are definitely some effects that are not so good for wildlife as a result of this pandemic. So, as you can see, the effects of this pandemic on birds and other wildlife is complicated. The whole idea of the slowdown in human activity as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic has actually been given a name. It's being referred to as the Anthropause. Anthro from the word for human. And of course, pause meaning, slow down. Everything's sort of pausing. And one result of the Anthropause that is definitely clear is that birds and other wildlife have the ability to respond very quickly to changes in human disturbance. When human activity changes, those birds and other wildlife species are often able to change in response to that very quickly. They adapt their behaviors very easily, which I think is really interesting. Another really fascinating component of research done on the Anthropause is its reliance on citizen science, is its reliance on people, just everyday people, going out, making observations about the natural world, and contributing those observations to some kind of online database. And so I would strongly encourage you to join this effort. There are amazing online databases like eBird or iNaturalist, and many others, where it's easy to take a picture or just record an observation in writing of something you saw, and that gets combined with millions of other people around the world and the observations that they are making. And it produces this amazing data set that scientists can use to analyze changes and look at the effects of all sorts of stuff. So it's a fantastic effort that we can all join together and really impact how science is done now and into the future. So I strongly recommend eBird, iNaturalist, and others that might be prominent and local in your areas. But those are two big worldwide efforts. So I hope that that was enjoyable and that you learned something about the effects of the pandemic on birds and wildlife. Thank you very much for the view. Subscribe to the channel. And until next time, enjoy the natural world.